Hey folks, what's one way to mislead, gaslight, and confuse an unsuspecting public? Well, one of them is to tell everyone that the problem of predation, which is everybody's bugaboo, everybody's whipping boy, is getting so much worse. But as some of us say, we don't know the true nature of it because either they're not telling us with all the statistics because they don't want to give it up, or there is a lot of people who are really guilty and they're focusing their energy elsewhere. Because why else would you focus most of your energy on things like proactive stings? Or in this case, focusing it on semantics. So here we have Ron DeSantis here in this piece I'm going to bring up right now. And the outgoing governor is trying to do what he has done throughout, engage in scare tactics. So predators beware. Florida locks the door on child offenders with a new Missy's law. In fact, they've locked the door so much that they are preventing people from actually living. And maybe what they ought to do is just come right out and say that we're just going to kill everybody who we associate with a sex offense. I don't know. But this, whenever they want to seem like they're tough or on crime or they're being really strict, they tighten the screws on people who are labeled as a sex offender. And by the way, folks, it's not so much only that they're doing that to people who are really violent predators, as they claim here, but anybody who they can associate with the word sex and online or sex and offender and possibly online is a dangerous predator by default. And as I've pointed out many times on this channel, and the source for this, Florida Action Committee, a division of NARSOL, has pointed out many times, this is a misnomer because there are lots of people on the sex offender registry, including children, and I don't think anybody would say small children are predators. Maybe what we need to do is get rid of the registry and deal with some real mental health counseling and other therapies. But no, that would bring $50 billion dollars pouring out of our coffers elsewhere, and we certainly couldn't have that. Besides, we need to have this stick to beat people, especially a fearful public that we've ginned up and gotten all excited, excuse me, into thinking that there's a pedophile in every bush ready to grab your children and drag them in. I'm not saying again, folks, that there aren't people out there willing to hurt children, but I want to take you through this article and see once again they go to the same old tropes to make their point, starting with the headline, Predators Beware. Now they have a new law called Missy's Law. And who is Missy's Law representing? Well, it represents the 1/10 of 1% of the cases, or whatever tiny percentage it is, of really the worst, most god awful horror that you can imagine visited upon a child, ending in murder. It's the same schlock that John Walsh has been getting away with now for about almost 30 years, where a incident where somebody looks cross-eyed at a child or makes an indecent proposal is the same as what happened to his child or this particular child. And they're nothing like it at all. We have gone past the time where we have taken a gram or two of marijuana and made it a 30-year offense. We are now endangering people more by being lenient with people who have drunk driving convictions and who continue to drive, giving them their license back with the idea, well, they need to get to work and support their families. I eventually hope that we'll get to it with regard to so-called sex offenders. So the first thing we need to understand is the hyperbolic nature. We're not talking about predators. We're talking about anybody that they label. Because if you go down here, you see under the new rules, anyone found guilty of or entering a plea for a dangerous crime must be immediately incarcerated. and held without bond. Well, this does several things. Number one, there's a lot to unpack here. New rules say that you are remanded into custody, and all you have to do as a prosecutor is say, hey, this is a dangerous crime. Hold that thought for a minute. But we're going to hold you without bond, which brings in an awful lot of money because very often the federal government reimburses the states and the counties reimburse the local jails, or I should say the state reimburses the local jails for holding people. This is money coming in, so they solve two problems, don't they? They gin up the public, they make a good political point for themselves in the process, and they bring in a revenue stream. A win-win-win. I'm sure they turn around and say, look at the jobs we've created and all the revenue we've brought in. Sorry to be cynical, but I'm no more cynical than these folks. Now, pick up that dangerous crime idea. Let's just look at it here. First of all, Governor DeSantis's hollow message. Justice demands that those who victimize innocent people, again, not everybody victimized anybody. In the proactive stings, there are no victims, face swift and meaningful consequences. Like every other meaningful, swift consequences, they have a ton of them in Florida law, and they result in disaster that makes nobody more safe, endangers public health and safety even more. Today, says outgoing Governor DeSantis, I signed two important bills to strengthen law and order in Florida because apparently that works, even though it hasn't worked for 30 years, apparently, because they have to keep getting tougher. Maybe that's not the solution. Holding dangerous criminals and sex offenders accountable. Now, I talked about the language here. I talked about the semantics. Here it comes. Okay. The legislation significantly expands the list of quote unquote dangerous crimes to include various computer pornography and child exploitation offenses. So let's see if we understand this. If you view pictures, that makes you dangerous. Do you know that there are, according to psychologists, people who are those who have a deep-seated sexual craving and desire to have a relationship, inappropriate as it is, with a child that involves also sex? They recognize, though, that this is a no-no in society, not to mention against the law, and they regulate themselves. And one of the ways they do it is by looking at pictures, engaging with stories and so forth online, etc. Well, how dangerous is that? It seems like in some ways it's a self-regulation method. Okay, now it is illegal. And the supposition, though, is that it always goes to something worse, and that is not borne out by the evidence. So what you do is you expand the list of dangerous crimes to include things that aren't necessarily dangerous crimes. In that regard, you then tell everybody in your news article, you predators beware, right? And that we're going to clean up the streets, even though the more we make ridiculously harsh rules, including chemical castration and killing people on the higher order or the worst tier offenses, however you want to view it, the more we don't get what we need, and the more we gin up the fear again, which increases it even more. And now you believe, if you talk to people out there, you will see that they believe that there are. I've seen, people 7 out of 10, okay, believe that there are pedophiles out there. 7 out of 10 who believe that somebody would abuse a child if they only had a chance. And we don't know this, of course. And I guarantee you Ron DeSantis doesn't know this either. Okay. But here it says it removes judicial discretion. In other words, judges aren't going to be allowed because they're not locking up enough people with that label. So we have to not only take it out of judges' hands, okay, which they're all for judges and law and order, unless, of course, it reduces their numbers. They have to keep ginning up those numbers because by ginning up those numbers, they bring in more revenue and they make a case that things are worse. Because if you lock up somebody and you point to them and say that they're a predator, people believe they're predators because you said so. You're a police officer or prosecutor or a governor, and they're behind bars after all. You just pointed to them. And then you tell everyone what they did, but you never say what the police did. And you never say that you expanded the definition to include damn near everything. Okay? Including AI generated sex abuse material. All right? And again, folks, I'm not saying I'm in favor of AI generated material. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we have to be honest about what real predation is. And judging by the trolls and vigilantes who have attacked me, they have no earthly idea. Remember, I'm a classic case of this. One count, which went down to three because they kept having to reduce it. And this one says, in effect, computer solicitation. You maybe, perhaps, might, I'm not sure, have been interested in doing this with a child, even though we don't have any evidence that you actually did these things or said these things that you wanted to do. That's it. That's what it amounts to. And again, come on by and I'll show you everything. I've already read enough of it into the evidence, but none of you believe that. At the same time, you believe everything that the police tell you. So I think you have given up the game there, haven't you? Okay. So here they once again end with the this is good for public safety. It's more rigorous sex offender registration because it's ridiculously rigorous. It's a chokehold on people who've already done their time and restitution to society. It expands prosecutorial tools. In other words, we give prosecutors much more power to give our laws more teeth and enforcement so that we can lock up more people, so we can say we've locked up more predators, and we never have to prove that they're actually predators because we've expanded the definition so broadly that anybody that we point to basically falls into it. And then they give away the truth and increased funding for law enforcement sting operations. Yeah, that's what we're really doing here. Because, see, it has the additional benefit of being able to go to the federal grant system and say, golly geez, we whiz willikers, we got all these pedophiles and predators here. Look at them. We're arresting all these people. We need more funding for this. And they get more funding to keep doing it, and they're going to have to ratchet it up again. They're going to have to make it worse. They're going to have to make it expand the definition even wider. If they don't do it, they can't keep making this argument. It's a winning argument, especially as you're going into an election. Democrats get behind it as well as Republicans. The new mandates for immediate custody and enhanced sentencing, code words for tougher sentences for the same thing or even a tiny offense, move into immediate effect under law. Folks, we need Democrats in charge in Virginia. This isn't a political game here. This isn't a political speech I'm doing at the end, but just to balance it. If Democrats were doing crazy things, I'd say, man, we need more Republicans in there just to balance it. The problem is you both sides use this argument to win. Our current governor, Abigail Spanberger, used to regularly run ads. We're going to get the scary sex offenders, get them. And I voted for her, even though for governor, she was just because she was the best of the two candidates. I don't want to say terrible candidates. They're both good people, I'm sure, but one would do something that's right 90% of the time and this awful 10%, and the other one would do wrong 90% of the time, in my judgment. But this is a winning argument for both sides until such time as more people step forward and say, look, this isn't doing what you say. It's making it harder on other people. It's making it harder on loved ones. It's not reuniting families. It's not making us safer. It's depriving businesses of effective workers that they need to do their business. And eventually, this needs to come out in the wash.